Imagine a family torn apart by one man's desperate desire for a son. What would you do if your dreams shattered your loved ones' lives? This is a story of betrayal, redemption, and the power of forgiveness. I can't keep going like this. I need an heir for my family, someone to carry on my name and take over when I'm gone. My wife has already given me 2 daughters, and now we're expecting another. Every time, I hope for a son, but it never happens. I feel a growing pressure on my shoulders, and the future seems to be slipping away. What if I never get the son I need? What will happen to everything I've worked for? This feeling is consuming me, and I'm running out of hope. How much longer can I bear this uncertainty and frustration? Once upon a time, there lived a beautiful couple named Janet and Lawrence. They were well loved and admired by everyone around them. Janet and Lawrence had 2 wonderful daughters, Elizabeth and Doris, and Janet was expecting another child. Can you guess what happens when tradition clashes with love? Stay tuned to Innocent Stories to find out. One day, Lawrence, feeling increasingly frustrated, said to Janet, "I hope this baby isn't another girl. I'm tired of having only daughters. I really need a son to carry on my name." Janet was deeply hurt by his words. She tried to stay calm and said, "Lawrence, it's not something I can control. It's what you put inside me, not what I can choose." But Lawrence was adamant. "No, Janet, it's the woman's responsibility to give a man a son. If you can't do that, then it's your fault." Janet felt a pang of sadness and worry. She decided to go for an ultrasound, hoping for some good news. When the results came back, the doctor told her that she was having another girl. Janet's heart sank. She knew Lawrence's disappointment would be great, so she chose to keep the news a secret. When Janet got home, she told Lawrence, "The baby is a boy." Lawrence's face lit up with joy. He was so excited that he immediately called his mother to share the news. Lawrence's mother had been pressuring him to find a new wife if Janet couldn't give him a son, so he was eager to share the good news. A week later, Lawrence surprised Janet with a shiny new car, celebrating what he thought was the arrival of his longed-for son. Janet smiled and thanked him, but inside, she felt a heavy weight of deceit. Though she was pleased with the new car and Lawrence's joy, Janet couldn't shake the feeling of worry. She knew that the truth could not stay hidden forever. Each day, she felt more anxious about how long she could maintain the lie and what would happen when Lawrence eventually discovered the truth. The weight of her deception was heavy, and Janet wondered how it would affect their family in the future. The day of Janet's delivery arrived, and Lawrence was full of anticipation. He had been waiting eagerly to see his son. As he arrived at the hospital, he was super excited, but when he spoke with the doctor, he was stunned to hear that Janet had given birth to another baby girl. Lawrence's face turned red with anger. He felt betrayed and furious. Without even going to see Janet or the baby, he stormed out of the hospital and went straight home. When Lawrence arrived home, his mother was already waiting for him. She had been anxiously expecting news about her new grandchild. Seeing Lawrence come through the door alone, she was puzzled. "Where is Janet? Where is the baby boy?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. Lawrence told his mother that Janet had deceived him and given birth to another girl. He was done with the situation. His mother was very angry. She said this was exactly why she had been urging him to find another wife. If Janet couldn't give him a son, she wasn't fulfilling her duty. Lawrence walked back and forth, his anger still intense. He couldn't believe Janet had tricked him and felt deeply betrayed. His mother, looking serious, said that he had been patient long enough. She advised him to think about his future and consider finding a new wife. If Janet couldn't give him a son, she believed he deserved an heir to carry on his name. Elizabeth and Doris, excited to meet their new sibling, saw Lawrence and eagerly asked why he hadn't brought home their mother and the baby brother. Lawrence's face grew stern as he told them that there was no baby brother. Janet had deceived them all and given birth to another girl. The news of a new baby sister thrilled Elizabeth and Doris. Elizabeth then asked when Lawrence would go back to bring their mother and the baby home. Lawrence shook his head and said he wouldn't be going back, insisting that Janet should stay at the hospital with the baby. Lawrence left the house in a storm of frustration and went to a bar to drink. At the bar, his friend noticed how upset Lawrence was and listened to his complaints. His friend was shocked and said that it was crazy to leave Janet and the baby at the hospital. He urged Lawrence to bring them home. Despite his friend's pleas, Lawrence remained firm, saying he was tired of having only girls in the house and didn't want to see another girl child. Realizing that Lawrence wouldn't change his mind, his friend decided to act. He went to the hospital, found Janet and the newborn baby, and brought them back home. Elizabeth and Doris were relieved and happy to see their mother and new baby sister return. Lawrence's friend made sure Janet and the baby were comfortable at home while Lawrence continued to grapple with his own frustrations. One evening, Janet was in her room when Lawrence's mother burst in, shouting and calling her names. She accused Janet of being a witch who had consumed all her male children in a coven. Janet, trying to stay calm, told her that the doctor had said it was the man's responsibility to father a male child, not the woman's fault. Lawrence's mother was not convinced. She insisted that, according to her beliefs, it was a woman's duty to give birth to a male child. She argued that if Janet couldn't do that, she should be blamed, and that Lawrence had every right to marry someone else. Janet, feeling frustrated, told Lawrence's mother that she should go back to school because she sounded so uneducated. This remark made Lawrence's mother even angrier. When Lawrence came home, his mother wasted no time in telling him what had happened. She described how Janet had insulted her and ignored her traditional beliefs. Lawrence was furious. He called Janet mannerless and told her she should be ashamed of herself for giving birth to 3 girls and not providing a male child. His anger was clear as he berated Janet, making her feel even more isolated and distressed. Janet asked Lawrence to take her and the baby to the clinic for a checkup, but he refused. When she complained, he called her names and said she was being unreasonable. Feeling desperate, Janet called Lawrence's friend, who agreed to take her and the baby to the clinic. When Lawrence returned home, his mother was waiting for him. She told him that he should go for a DNA test because she wasn't sure that he was the father of the 3 children. Lawrence was stunned and asked why she doubted him. His mother explained that Lawrence's friend had taken Janet and the baby to the clinic. She suggested that since Lawrence's friend was involved, there might be more to the situation than he knew. This added to Lawrence's anger and confusion, making the situation even more strained at home. Lawrence, feeling betrayed and angry, went to confront his friend. When he found him, he demanded to know why his friend had taken Janet and the baby to the clinic without his permission. His friend looked at Lawrence with frustration. "You're such a mama's boy," he said. "You always believe everything your mother tells you without thinking for yourself. You should be focusing on your own family instead of letting your mother control everything." Lawrence was shocked by the words but knew there was some truth to them. His friend continued, "You're letting your mother's opinions and your own anger mess up your family. Instead of blaming others, you should think about what's really important." Lawrence felt a mix of guilt and frustration. He realized that he needed to take responsibility for his actions and start making better decisions for his family. When Lawrence arrived home, he was determined to address the issue with Janet. He called her to the living room and, with a firm tone, told her that once their baby turned 2 months old, they needed to start trying for another child. He was adamant that they needed a son. Janet, feeling exhausted and overwhelmed from caring for their newborn and managing their 2 other daughters, responded that she wasn't ready to think about another pregnancy so soon. She needed time to recover and focus on their current children. Lawrence's frustration reached a boiling point. His face reddened as he shouted, "If you can't agree to try for another baby soon, I'm going to find someone else who can give me a son. I'm done with this." His anger was clear, and Janet felt a deep sadness at his words. She had hoped for understanding and support, not threats. Lawrence stormed out of the room and went to his mother's room. Lawrence then went to his mother and told her about his plan. She agreed and said she would go to the village to find a woman who could give Lawrence a son. 3 days later, Lawrence's mother returned from the village with a new wife for him. Her name was Angela. Angela was introduced to Lawrence, and his mother said that she would be the one to fulfill Lawrence's desire for a male heir. Janet was left feeling even more isolated, now facing the reality of sharing her husband with another woman. Janet couldn't hold back her tears any longer. One evening, she went to Lawrence, crying and pleading. She told him she had thought he was joking when he mentioned getting a new wife. Her voice was filled with sadness and desperation as she begged him to reconsider. Lawrence looked at her coldly. "You haven't seen anything yet. If you can't accept this, then maybe you should just leave," he said harshly. A few months later, Angela discovered she was pregnant. Lawrence's mother was overjoyed. She came to Janet with a big smile, announcing that Angela was carrying a male child and that she had seen it in her dream. This was exactly what they needed. Janet, feeling defeated and angry, responded that she didn't care and that Angela could have as many boys as she wanted. Janet was focused only on taking care of her own children. Tired of Lawrence's mother constantly abusing her, Janet asked the old woman when she would go back to the village, since this was not her husband's house. Lawrence's mother, outraged by Janet's words, turned on her and called her mannerless, claiming her parents had failed in raising her properly. The tension in the house continued to build. Janet struggled to manage her emotions and care for her children. Angela soon started insulting Janet once she found out she was carrying a male child. She flaunted her pregnancy, making sure to remind Janet every chance she got that she was finally giving Lawrence the son he always wanted. Janet tried to ignore the taunts, focusing on her daughters and keeping the household running. One day, Angela confronted Janet in the kitchen, smirking as she touched her growing belly. She said that a real woman knows how to give her husband a son and that Janet had failed in her duty. Janet, feeling hurt and angry, told Angela that her worth wasn't tied to the gender of her children and that she loved her daughters deeply. Angela laughed and told Janet that love wouldn't keep Lawrence from finding a real wife who could give him a proper heir. Janet held back her tears, determined not to let Angela see how much her words hurt. Meanwhile, Lawrence's mother continued to side with Angela, praising her for carrying a male child and treating Janet with disdain. Lawrence, caught up in the excitement of having a potential son, ignored Janet's feelings and focused all his attention on Angela. One evening, Lawrence laughed at Janet, saying, "Look at what Angela has done in just a few weeks, something you couldn't do after all these years." Janet's daughters, Elizabeth and Doris, could sense the tension and tried to comfort their mother. Janet did her best to stay strong for them, even as she felt increasingly isolated and unwanted in her own home. The house grew more divided with each passing day. Janet struggled to keep her emotions in check while Angela and Lawrence's mother continued their cruel remarks. The situation weighed heavily on Janet, but she remained focused on her daughters, determined to provide them with as much love and stability as possible. Finally, the day came when Angela went into labor. Lawrence and his mother were filled with anticipation, eager to welcome the new baby. Janet stayed in her room, praying for strength to face whatever came next. When the baby was born, Lawrence and his mother rushed to the hospital. The doctor came out with a smile, announcing that Angela had given birth to a healthy baby boy. Lawrence was overjoyed, feeling a sense of pride and relief. Back at home, Janet braced herself for the changes that would come. She knew her place in the family had been further diminished. When Angela and the baby got home, things became even worse. Lawrence stopped paying the school fees for Elizabeth and Doris. He also stopped giving Janet money for their clothes. Janet was deeply worried and decided to talk to Lawrence about it. One evening, she gathered her courage and asked him why he had changed so much. Lawrence looked at her coldly and said he didn't have money for girls. He told her that girls usually end up in the kitchen and that he was not ready to waste his money on them. Janet felt a deep sense of betrayal. She reminded Lawrence that their daughters were smart and deserved a good education. She told him that girls could achieve great things too. Lawrence just shrugged and walked away, leaving Janet feeling helpless and alone. As the days passed, the situation became more unbearable. Elizabeth and Doris noticed that their father was treating them differently. They asked their mother why he was acting this way. Janet, holding back tears, explained that their father was going through a difficult time and that they needed to be strong. Janet started working 2 jobs in order to be able to take care of her daughter's needs. Despite her efforts, it was hard to make ends meet, and the girls felt the strain of their father's neglect. Angela, noticing the tension in the house, took every opportunity to boast about her son and her favored position. She enjoyed seeing Janet struggle and often made snide comments about how Lawrence finally had a real family. Lawrence's mother continued to support Angela, often ignoring Janet and her granddaughters. She spent most of her time with Angela and the new baby, further isolating Janet and her daughters. One day, Elizabeth and Doris came home from school in tears because they were sent home for not having their school fees paid. Janet comforted them, promising that she would find a way to pay the fees. That night, Janet approached Lawrence again, begging him to reconsider his stance for the sake of their daughter's future. Lawrence was unmoved. He repeated that he didn't see the point in spending money on girls who would only end up cooking and cleaning. He told Janet to be grateful for what they had and not to expect more. Feeling desperate, Janet reached out to Lawrence's friend, the one who had helped her before. She explained the situation, and he was shocked to hear how bad things had gotten. He promised to help where he could and even offered to pay the girls' school fees for the time being. With his help, Elizabeth and Doris were able to return to school. Janet was grateful but knew this was only a temporary solution. She continued to work hard, determined to provide for her daughters and give them the future they deserved, despite Lawrence's neglect and the growing hostility in the house. When Lawrence found out that his best friend had paid his daughter's school fees, he was furious. He confronted Janet, accusing her of having an affair with his friend. He said he knew she was sleeping with him and that one day he would catch them together. Janet was shocked and hurt by his accusations, but Lawrence wouldn't listen to her. Angela, always looking for a way to make Janet's life harder, saw this as an opportunity. She told Lawrence that he should chase Janet and her daughters out of the house. Angela argued that they didn't belong there and that it was time for Lawrence to focus on his new family. Lawrence, still seething with anger, told Angela that he would do it soon, but for now, they would stay. Janet felt the walls closing in on her. She tried to explain to Lawrence that his friend was just being kind and helping them out, but Lawrence wouldn't hear it. He was convinced that Janet was unfaithful and that his friend had ulterior motives. One evening, Angela decided to push things further. She started spreading rumors among the neighbors that Janet was having an affair with Lawrence's friend. She whispered lies and half-truths, making sure everyone heard her version of the story. Soon, the whole neighborhood was gossiping about Janet, and she could feel their judgmental stares whenever she stepped outside. Janet, despite the mounting pressure, remained focused on her daughters. She continued working her 2 jobs, determined to provide for Elizabeth and Doris. The girls, though young, understood the sacrifices their mother was making and tried their best to support her in any way they could. Meanwhile, Lawrence's mother, always eager to see Janet fail, sided with Angela. She added fuel to the fire by constantly reminding Lawrence that a real wife wouldn't need help from another man. She told him that Janet was a disgrace and that he should get rid of her as soon as possible. Lawrence's anger and frustration reached a boiling point. One night, after a particularly heated argument with Janet, he stormed out of the house and went to a bar to drink away his anger. While he was gone, Angela took the opportunity to pack some of Janet's and the girls' belongings and place them by the door, a not-so-subtle hint that they should leave. When Lawrence returned home, he saw the bags by the door and Angela waiting with a satisfied smile. Angela suggested again that it was time to kick Janet and her daughters out. Lawrence, still angry and now drunk, felt his resolve weakening. However, he decided to wait a bit longer, telling Angela that he would handle it soon. Janet, seeing the bags and understanding what was happening, felt a deep sadness. She knew her time in the house was limited and that she needed to find a way to secure a better future for her daughters. 5 years later, Lawrence won a huge contract and made a lot of money from it. With his newfound wealth, he bought a new house and moved there with Angela, their son, and his mother. He left Janet and her 3 daughters behind without a second thought. He told Janet he was done with her and their marriage. Lawrence informed her that he had already sold the house where she and the girls were living and that the new owners would move in within 4 days. Janet was devastated. She had no idea how she would find a new place to live in such a short time. She approached Lawrence, hoping he would at least give her some money to rent an apartment. Lawrence coldly refused, telling her she should go and meet his best friend if she needed help, implying that they were in a relationship. His words cut Janet deeply, but she refused to let him see her break down. Janet went to Lawrence's best friend for help, but when she arrived, his wife didn't let her in. She said her husband was tired of Janet constantly disturbing him with her problems. Janet felt another door close on her. She couldn't go to her parents' house because they had already disowned her. They had warned her not to marry Lawrence, but she didn't listen. With nowhere else to go, Janet and her daughters ended up living in an uncompleted building. They started begging in the streets, struggling to survive each day. Elizabeth, now a teenager, tried to comfort her mother, telling her that they would get through this together. Doris, still young but wise beyond her years, promised to help in any way she could. Despite their dire situation, Janet remained focused on her daughters, doing her best to keep them safe and hopeful. Meanwhile, Lawrence continued his life with Angela and their son in the new house. He lavished them with gifts and enjoyed his new wealth, feeling no remorse for abandoning his first family. Angela, now even more confident in her position, continued to belittle Janet whenever she got the chance, enjoying the power she held over her. One day, Janet managed to find a small job cleaning houses, which provided just enough money to buy food for her daughters. The work was hard, but Janet was determined to do whatever it took to support Elizabeth, Doris, and little Grace. The girls, though young, understood the sacrifices their mother was making and tried their best to support her in any way they could. One morning, Janet went to one of the houses where she worked. While cleaning the kitchen, she couldn't hold back her tears. She remembered how she once had a perfect life with her husband and kids. Just then, Chief Bernard, the owner of the house, walked in. He saw her crying and asked what was wrong. Janet tried to hide it and said nothing, but Chief Bernard persuaded her to open up. Janet then narrated everything that had happened to her and her daughters. Chief Bernard was shocked that she had to go through all this because of not having a male child. He listened carefully and couldn't believe the cruelty she had faced. He told Janet that it was too risky for her and her daughters to live in an uncompleted building. He insisted that they move into his house for their safety. Janet was so happy and grateful. She moved in with her daughters, and Chief Bernard enrolled them in one of the best schools. The girls, finally in a stable and secure environment, began to thrive. They made new friends, excelled in their studies, and started to feel a sense of normalcy and happiness that had been missing for so long. Meanwhile, Angela continued to spoil and pamper her son, Jason. She gave him anything he asked for, believing it was the best way to show her love. Neighbors started gossiping about the way Angela was raising her son. They said this wasn't the right way to train a child. One of Angela's friends even told her that she was spoiling Jason too much, but Angela dismissed her friend's concerns, saying her son was simply enjoying his father's money. As Jason grew older, his behavior started to become a problem. He became demanding and disrespectful, expecting everything to be handed to him. Angela, blinded by her love for him, didn't see the damage she was causing. Lawrence, busy with work and maintaining his status, didn't pay much attention to the situation, trusting Angela to handle their son's upbringing. Back at Chief Bernard's house, Janet and her daughters found a new sense of family and support. Chief Bernard treated them like his own, always offering advice and guidance. Elizabeth, now in her final years of school, began preparing for college with dreams of becoming a doctor. Doris discovered a talent for art and wanted to pursue it further. Grace, the youngest, blossomed into a bright and cheerful girl, loved by everyone. One day, as they sat in the garden, Janet asked Chief Bernard about his family. She had always been curious but never felt it was her place to ask. This time, she gathered the courage to bring it up. Janet wanted to know more about Chief Bernard's past, wondering if he had a wife and children. Chief Bernard smiled gently and began to share. He told Janet about his past marriage and the 2 children he had. His children were studying abroad, pursuing their dreams, and he felt proud of them. Though it was hard being away from them, he found comfort in their frequent calls and holiday visits. Janet listened, feeling a mix of curiosity and sympathy. She could see how much Chief Bernard missed his children but also understood his pride in their achievements. It made her reflect on her own children and the sacrifices she had made for them. After a moment of silence, Chief Bernard asked Janet if she ever thought about remarrying. The question struck a chord with her. She admitted that while the thought had crossed her mind, she wasn't ready for it. Her focus was on her daughters and ensuring they had a stable and happy life. Chief Bernard nodded in understanding, expressing admiration for her dedication. He complimented her on being a strong and caring mother, and Janet felt a warm sense of gratitude. She thanked Chief Bernard for his support, acknowledging how much he had done for her and her daughters. Chief Bernard waved off her thanks, emphasizing the joy and light they had brought into his home. He reassured her that it was a pleasure having them there. A few years later, 2 of Janet's daughters were flown abroad by Chief Bernard for their education. One became a lawyer, while the other became an accountant. The third daughter, who stayed with Janet, pursued a career in medicine and was now a medical doctor. Meanwhile, Jason, Angela's son, had also graduated. Lawrence decided it was time to retire and handed over his company to Jason. Initially, Lawrence was proud, believing Jason would carry on his legacy and ensure the company's success. However, it wasn't long before Jason started to misuse the company's funds. He spent lavishly on expensive trips and indulged in a luxurious lifestyle, often squandering money on parties and women. The company's employees grew increasingly concerned, witnessing the reckless spending and fearing for the future of the business. The workers began calling Lawrence to complain about Jason's behavior. They warned that if Jason continued on this path, the company might collapse. Lawrence, alarmed by the reports, confronted Jason about his irresponsible actions. When Lawrence voiced his concerns to Angela, she dismissed them. Angela insisted that their son was merely enjoying life and that there was no real harm in his spending. She assured Lawrence that Jason was not wasting money but rather living the life he deserved. Lawrence began to deeply regret listening to his mother. He realized that his obsession with having a male heir led him to make decisions he now wished he could change. He saw how Jason's reckless behavior and the company's decline were the direct result of his misguided choices. The company, once prosperous, was now drowning in debt. In a desperate bid to save it, Jason turned to illegal activities. He hoped that by engaging in these actions, he could turn the business around and prevent it from collapsing. Unfortunately, Jason's plans failed when his accomplices were caught, confessed, and led to his arrest. When Lawrence heard about Jason's arrest, he was devastated. He began drinking heavily to cope with the stress and disappointment. As the situation worsened, he lost the company he had worked so hard to build. The weight of failure and regret grew heavier each day. Angela, in an attempt to support her son, visited him in jail. During the visit, Jason lashed out at her, calling her a useless mother and blaming her for his troubles. He told her never to visit him again, expressing his anger and frustration with her presence. Angry and hurt, Angela began seeing other men, trying to escape the reality of her situation. When Lawrence noticed her behavior and complained about her frequent outings, Angela dismissed his concerns. She told him to be quiet, asserting that he was now a poor man and had no right to criticize her actions. The strain on their relationship grew as Angela's behavior continued to upset Lawrence. He was left grappling with the fallout of his decisions, feeling the weight of regret for not valuing Janet and her daughters. Soon, Lawrence lost his house because he had used it as collateral for a loan at the bank. When he couldn't pay off the loan, the bank took his house. Seeing that everything was now gone, Angela left him. Desperate, Lawrence went to his best friend for help, but his friend's wife didn't even let him see her husband. She chased Lawrence away, calling him a madman. With nowhere else to go, Lawrence decided to return to the village. In the village, his mother constantly called him a poor man and told him to find work because she couldn't keep feeding a grown man like him. Lawrence would cry, remembering how he used to spend money on his mother. Some of the villagers laughed at him, calling him a once wealthy man. One day, Lawrence could not bear the insults from his mother any longer. He confronted her, accusing her of making him chase away his beloved wife and daughters. He said he regretted ever listening to her. His mother called him a foolish man and an unwise mummy's boy, telling him that he should have been able to make his own decisions. Feeling overwhelmed, Lawrence packed a few of his things and left the village to start a new life in the city. On his way to the city, the bus he was on was involved in a terrible accident. Miraculously, Lawrence was the only survivor and was rushed to the hospital. Unknown to him, it was the same hospital owned by his daughter Grace, who had become a successful medical doctor. As Lawrence lay unconscious in the hospital bed, Grace, who was doing her rounds, was informed about a critical patient who had just been admitted. She quickly went to check on the patient, only to discover it was her estranged father. When Grace saw Lawrence in the hospital, she was so angry. She quickly left the room and went to her office, where she called her mother. Grace told Janet everything, her voice trembling with emotion. Janet listened patiently and then gently urged her daughter to forgive Lawrence, no matter what he had done to them in the past. Grace, still angry about everything Lawrence did to them, said she would think about it and hung up. That evening, when Grace returned home, Janet sat her down and talked to her. She reminded Grace of the importance of forgiveness and how holding on to anger would only hurt her. After a long conversation, Grace reluctantly agreed to help her father. The next day, Grace returned to the hospital and reviewed Lawrence's condition. She discovered that he needed urgent surgery abroad, which was very expensive. Her anger resurfaced. She thought to herself, I can't waste so much money on this wicked man. What if he doesn't survive? My money will be gone just like that. As Grace sat in her office, deep in thought, Chief Bernard walked in. He noticed the troubled look on her face and asked what was wrong. Grace, feeling overwhelmed, told him everything. Chief Bernard listened carefully and then gently urged her to forgive her father. He assured her that Lawrence must have learned his lessons by now. To Grace's surprise, Chief Bernard even offered to pay for Lawrence's surgery. Grace was surprised by his generosity. She had always known Chief Bernard to be kind, but this act of selflessness moved her deeply. She felt a conflict within herself. Part of her wanted to leave Lawrence to his fate, while another part felt the pull of family and forgiveness. Chief Bernard's words echoed in her mind, and she realized that holding on to her anger wasn't the answer. She decided to accept Chief Bernard's offer. When she told him, he smiled warmly and arranged everything for Lawrence's surgery abroad. Grace felt a sense of relief, knowing that she had made the right choice, even if it was a difficult one. Lawrence was flown abroad for the surgery, and it was a success. When Lawrence came back from abroad, he went straight to Grace. He told her that he had nowhere else to go and that he was now homeless. Grace was unsure of what to do. She gave him some money to rent a hotel for a few days while she figured out a solution. Grace then told Chief Bernard about the situation. To her surprise, Chief Bernard suggested that Lawrence could come and live in his boys' quarters. When Grace told Janet, she was firmly against the idea. Janet believed Lawrence was a chameleon and warned that he hadn't truly changed. Chief Bernard, however, begged Janet to reconsider. He assured her that Lawrence had changed. Janet, still skeptical, asked Chief Bernard why he was so determined to help Lawrence. Chief Bernard smiled and told her that she would soon find out, leaving Janet puzzled and curious. Grace was caught in the middle, torn between her mother's distrust and Chief Bernard's unwavering faith in Lawrence's transformation. Despite her reservations, Grace decided to trust Chief Bernard's judgment. She informed Lawrence that he could move into the boys' quarters. Lawrence moved in, grateful for the second chance. He began helping out around the house and even started looking for a job. Janet watched him closely, still wary but hoping for the best. Days turned into weeks, and Lawrence's behavior remained sincere. He showed genuine remorse for his past actions and made efforts to mend his relationship with Grace and Janet. Slowly, Janet began to see a change in him. One evening, as they all sat down for dinner, Lawrence shared stories from his time in the village. He talked about how he had struggled and how the villagers had mocked him. He spoke of his regrets and how he wished he could turn back time. His honesty touched everyone at the table. Grace started to soften towards her father. She saw how much he had changed and how hard he was trying. She began to include him more in family activities and even invited him to her clinic to see the work she was doing. Janet, though still cautious, noticed the growing bond between Grace and Lawrence. One day, she found Lawrence fixing a broken fence in the garden. She approached him, and they had a long conversation about the past. Lawrence apologized once again, and this time, Janet felt a sense of closure. She decided to give him a real chance. Chief Bernard's mysterious confidence in Lawrence's change of heart intrigued Janet. One evening, as they sat in the garden, Janet finally asked Chief Bernard again why he was so bent on helping Lawrence. Chief Bernard looked at her with a warm smile and said, "Janet, sometimes people need a second chance to show their true colors. I believe everyone deserves an opportunity to make things right. And besides, there's something you should know about me. I once made many mistakes in my past too, and someone gave me a second chance. That person changed my life." Janet was moved by Chief Bernard's story. She realized that giving Lawrence a second chance was not just about helping him but also about embracing the power of forgiveness and redemption. As time passed, Lawrence continued to prove himself. He found a job and worked hard, slowly rebuilding his life. He remained close to Grace and Janet, grateful for their support and determined to be a better father in person. A few weeks later, Lawrence gathered his courage and asked Janet to marry him. He hoped they could start fresh and build a new life together. To his surprise, Janet said no. Lawrence was surprised. He thought she had forgiven him. Janet nodded and said she had, but she was in love with someone else. Lawrence asked who it was, and Janet said it was Chief Bernard. Lawrence felt a surge of anger and stormed out. He was furious and hurt. He regretted ever chasing Janet and his daughters out of his house. His mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions as he walked back to his apartment. How could he have been so blind? How could he have let the best thing in his life slip away? When Lawrence got home, he couldn't contain his anger. He smashed a few things in his room, feeling utterly defeated. He knew that leaving Janet for Chief Bernard to marry was the right thing to do, but it still hurt to see her so happy with someone else. He had lost everything that mattered to him because of his foolish decisions. Meanwhile, Janet felt a mix of relief and sadness. She knew that rejecting Lawrence's proposal was the right thing to do, but it still hurt to see him so angry and broken. She hoped that he would eventually find peace and move on with his life. As the weeks passed, Lawrence gradually came to terms with his situation. He focused on self-improvement and building a better future. He also made efforts to mend his relationship with his daughters, who were initially hesitant but eventually saw the genuine change in him. One day, Lawrence received a letter from Janet. She wrote about how she wished him well and hoped that he would find peace and happiness. Lawrence felt a sense of closure and was grateful for Janet's kind words. Life went on, and everyone found their own paths to happiness. Janet and Chief Bernard planned their future together, filled with hope and love. Grace and her sisters continued to excel in their careers, making their mother proud every day. Lawrence, though he had lost many things, found a new sense of purpose. He realized that the most important lessons in life often come from the hardest experiences. He vowed to live his life with integrity and kindness, knowing that true happiness comes from within. In the end, each of them learned that forgiveness, love, and resilience are the keys to overcoming life's challenges. Their journeys were not easy, but they emerged stronger and wiser, ready to face whatever the future held. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button for innocent stories. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed.